was very, very interested in radio, and that culminated in me travelling off to work at sea. And of course, hey, I think the more dodgy the place is, the more bits of paper they want to give you. This is the, I guess this is the Panamanian equivalent of the radio operator's general certificate of proficiency. Hello, and welcome to The Art of Engineering, a place where art meets engineering. Hi folks, it's been a little while since I've done a video. I've been very, very busy completing my exams for my engineering degree that I'm presently working on. So if you're interested in seeing an adult old person try to complete an engineering degree, plenty of videos on that. But I've recently had my interest in radio reignited. So this video is going to be a little bit about my journey back into ham radio. Now, for those of you that don't know what ham radio is, if you are a geek, it's a really fantastic hobby to get involved with, because it basically allows you to build antennas, build transmitters, and play around with radio gear. Something that I did as a child. And this video is going to be a quick walk through or wander down memory lane of the radio qualifications that I have, and I'm actually quite surprised by just how many bits of paper I actually do have. So we'll be having a look at all of those bits of paper. They're supposed to mean that I know a lot about radio, but I've probably forgotten most of it. But at any rate, I will be reapplying for my radio license, and we are in the hot pursuit of creating a station here and communicating via Morse code, hopefully. So if you're interested in any of those things, ham radio, technology, all that sort of stuff, stay tuned, because this might be a little bit interesting for you, hopefully. And now a very, very quick word from our sponsor, which is me. Quick and unashamed. There will be a link to this shirt down below, and another one that's Morse code based. Ham radio. So if you're interested in supporting the channel, or you just like a shirt that commemorates the hobby of ham radio, please click the links below. Back to the video. Well, back in the day, I was very, very interested in radio, and that culminated in me travelling off to work at sea, and mostly in the offshore oil and gas industry. And if you look in the description below this video, I've linked to some of that stuff that I did when I was working at sea, and the ships and whatnot that I worked on. But these are all the bits of paper that over the years I accrued in my pursuit of, my obsessive pursuit of all things radio. Anyway, I'm going to get these organised, and we're just going to very, very quickly, I'm going to try not to bore you too much, but we're going to very quickly look over all the bits of paper that I've got, and what they mean, what they don't mean, etc., etc. I'm going to try and do this in the order that I got all my bits of paper. As a young lad, I was very interested in electronics. I started, like a lot of people, started with Dick Smith kits, fun way to electronics. And the first time I built a crystal radio and strung an antenna up and was listening to radio stations, I was just amazed that that could happen. And I got very interested in radio. And then, as serendipity would have it, we had a customer at the shop who was a ham radio operator who became a good family friend, and he mentored me in the process, Mr. Berry, John Berry, God bless his soul. And I was basically playing around in his Radio Shack. He had just an amazing array of radio gear, and he had pursued the hobby as a young lad as well. And so that culminated in me initially at the age of about 13, I think, in year 7, getting this piece of paper here. And this is the Novice Amateur Operator's Certificate of Proficiency. And what's really amazing, or really amusing actually, is that photo on the back here, me with a little bit more hair than I have today, and a really cheesy little moustache, like I've just had a Vegemite sandwich. So that was the first qualification that I got at the age of 13. To get this particular certificate, I'll just quickly read what it says on here. An elementary knowledge of radio telegraphy and radio telephony and electrical principles. Knowledge of such regulations and ability to send correctly and to receive correctly by ear in Morse code a message in plain language at a speed of 5 words per minute. So, yep, Morse code back then. You don't need Morse code for your amateur license anymore. but you do still hear it on the Morse bands. You still hear it around, so it's still happening. Morse will never die. And then in high school, when I should have been trying to get a better HSC result, like all my friends were, I was at Sydney Boys High School with lots and lots of nerds who were all getting, close to 500 ATARs for their HSC, which was out of 500, so it's kind of like getting a 99.98. I didn't get anywhere near that because I was still obsessively playing around with radio gear and not really studying like I should. And this is the Amateur Operator Certificate of Proficiency, which is the full license. And once again, I think I've even used the same photo. So it was, I was 13 years old when that was taken, and I was probably about nearly 18 when I got my full license. So this is the full license, the AOCP, which involved a change of call sign. I was a VK2 PSE. I went to VK2 CGD, and apparently those call signs are still available, and I may apply for my old call sign if I can get it, because that would be a fun thing to do. So that's the Amateur Operator Certificate of Proficiency. Pretty much the same, greater level of knowledge, and the Morse code test was 10 words per minute. And so that was the second qualification that I got. So after that, I was thinking about doing electrical engineering, and being as I had really struggled with the mathematics, and I was knowing that I was going to have a lot of difficulty with mathematics, which has been borne out by my present journey on this channel, which is getting my engineering degree. The maths for someone who's not very mathematical is very difficult, but you can do it, or at least I think I'm doing it. We'll wait and see what results I've gotten this year. So we went off to Maritime College, and the first qualification I got while I was at Maritime College was this. And this document here is the Restricted Operators Certificate of Proficiency. Now, they give you these really lovely certificates, or they used to. I don't know if they still do, that almost look like passports. And this actual certificate is an operator's certificate. And the reason why we did this certificate was because they wanted us to go away on the college vessel and practice operating with gear that was on board the vessel. So this allowed me to use all the sailor gear and the type of stuff that I was using was basically HF and VHF maritime transceivers for communicating at sea. And it was a Clifford and Snell 710 by Sailor, and the Clifford and Snell CS1A. So that was a transmitter and a receiver, and the shipmate RS8000, which I'm assuming was the VHF transceiver on board. So that was the third qualification. And the first one I got when I was at Maritime College, so that I could operate that gear. So that's the sort of thing that someone working on a fishing vessel or a trawler, or someone working in the deck area would need to operate that gear. And that was in my first year, I think it was. And then going into second year, we had to get our full radio license or certificate, which was called the Radio Operator's General Certificate of Proficiency. So this one sounds very similar. It's the ROCP, but the Radio Operator's General Certificate of Proficiency, which is this beautiful document here, was what you require, the statutory requirement for going to sea as a radio officer on merchant ships at sea. And get a load of that handsome young man with all of that hair. So yeah, that would have been probably 22 years old, and this certificate never expires, and it's a little bit more detailed than the amateur license. It's things like a theoretical knowledge of marine radio telegraph and telephone transmitters and receivers, marine antenna systems, marine automatic alarm devices, radio equipment for lifeboats and other survival craft, direction finding equipment. I had some fun with that direction finding test that I had to do. I nearly failed because of it. A practical knowledge of operation and adjustment of equipment, lots of regulations that you had to learn as well, knowledge of general geography of the world. And it says here that what this qualified me to do is operate an amateur station. So this is basically covering everything. It's the golden ticket. Amateur station, a coast station, Class A and B, an earth station, Class A limited coast station, marine rescue station, mobile station, and ship station class B and C. So pretty heavy going to get that. And Morse code started at 5 words for the novice, 10 words for the amateur operator certificate of proficiency. This was 20 words per minute. And I don't think I'd be able to do 20 now. Wouldn't have a hope in hell. Along with that certificate, because I'd done an associate diploma in marine radio communications, that also gave me exempt status for another certificate, which is this one here, which is the broadcast operators certificate of proficiency. So this is basically what a broadcast station technician would have to hold to keep that job. And it says here, a knowledge of the general principles of electricity and of radio technology and of all the electrical and radio telephony equipment used in a radio broadcasting station. Practical knowledge of working and adjustment of the equipment normally used in a radio broadcasting station. The ability to adjust and carry out maintenance on the equipment referred to in the last preceding paragraph. Quite amusing considering that I never ever stepped foot in a broadcast station. But the high-powered transmitters you were using on a ship were very, very similar. I'm guessing. Probably not at all. But anyway, I got this. Now, it's quite a funny story. I had that technician exempt status for years, and I never bothered applying for this certificate. And then when I eventually did, they went, hey, we're not even issuing those anymore. And I'm like, well, can you maybe just send me one? Because, I'd like to have it in my resume. And the gentleman in question was very nice about it. He basically said, look, don't tell anyone because, everyone's going to want one. But they did send it to me, which was nice of them. And it's nice to have it as a keepsake. So, got all of that, and eventually, after a little bit of difficulty, found myself at sea. And I was actually on a ship that was Panamanian flagged. Now, you'll find a lot of ships, regardless of what country they come from, will have what's known as a flag of convenience, which is a way of avoiding a lot of the more stringent regulations regarding maintenance and age of vessels. It also allows them to avoid tax sometimes as well, all that sort of stuff. So Panama is one of the countries that's a country of choice for a flag of convenience, and the oil rig that I was on at the time, can't remember the name of it, I think it was the Diamond M General, which became the Ocean General, that had a Panamanian flag. So as it turns out, because it still had a radio installation that was radio telegraphy, it was still Morse code even though they weren't using it, they needed to have that looked after by a qualified Panamanian radio officer. And I could get the qualification because my qualifications were international. So, as it turns out, I got this wonderful document here. And this document is it's actually in Panamanian, so I can't read it, but it's a Panamanian. It's basically the Panamanian equivalent of that radio operator's certificate that I showed you for ship's radio officer. And so that was my Panamanian certificate. And I also got another one here. And I think this is the Class 1 radio telegraph license that I also had to have. And it says limitations on here. And my limitations are none. So I'm completely unlimited, which is wonderful. And so that was something that I got, once again, in 98, issued to me so that I could maintain the radio equipment on that oil rig because it was Panamanian. So all of that was wonderful. Oh, and of course, hey, I think the more dodgy the place is, the more bits of paper they want to give you. This is the, I guess this is the Panamanian equivalent of the radio operator's general certificate of proficiency. And it's very similar in its, being a very officious document. And it's Class 1 radio telegraph license. And when I sign on articles and whatnot, that should have been stamped and whatnot. But hey, they weren't bothering doing any of that stuff. And as I was transitioning out of being a radio officer, I got this really weird idea that I wanted to be a pilot. And thankfully, I after a few near misses, decided that I was probably not well suited to being in an aircraft. A little bit, I'm not careful enough, and had some near misses. and it was also very expensive, and I probably left my run too late as well. And yeah, it just wasn't working for me. So I got a restricted private pilot's license, and I was about 5 hours from a private license. But this actually has a radio license in it as well. When you get your pilot's license, you get a flight radio telephone operator's license, so that you're allowed to operate the communications gear in the plane. So that's another radio license. And we're nearly to the end. Now, my most proud moment was when Mad Pierre on the Peregrine, which was a dynamically positioned drillship, gave me this beautiful certificate. And it's the certificate for operating the automatic coffee maker 10 to 12 cups. And his running joke was just the amount of bits of paper they were giving you on the oil rig for safety inductions and whatnot made him laugh his head off. And he was a rather odd chap at any rate. And I'll tell you a Mad Pierre story another time, because yeah, he was quite a character. And anyway, that was the certificate that he gave me in honour of my coffee making skills when I brought him coffee on the bridge. So while I was on the oil rig as well, we were using an iTerra Earth Station, which is a Telstra satellite communications piece of equipment. And we had to do an induction on how to commission that piece of equipment, because it would get flown out and we would have to set it up, point the antenna, all that sort of stuff. And I've got a story about that too. I nearly lost my foot under the counterweight that was hanging off the bottom of the dish for this. If you want to hear that story, comment below and ask, hey, I want to hear the story, and I will tell it. And the Mad Pierre story as well. And finally, as we were being phased out, they really didn't know what they were going to do with the radio officer, whether they were going to retrain them as technical officers or electronics officers, or whether they were going to give them redundancies. I never got the redundancy because I came into the industry after we were already told we were on the way out. It was just like, well, if you want to do it, best of luck. And it worked out okay. I got quite a number of years, I think 6 or 7 years at sea. It was good. But this is the GMDSS, which is it's a Global Maritime Distress and Safety System General Operator Certificate. So this is to operate all the new gear, basically, that replaced me on the ship, which was placed on the bridge. And I am imagining if you're a deck officer, you may or may not still require this, but it may be part of your certification now. But that is something that, unfortunately, unlike the Radio Operator's General Certificate of Proficiency, which lasts for your entire life, it's basically assume that you're clever enough to keep up with things. This one, unfortunately, will become invalid. And this one actually became invalid in 2001. So I think it's a 5-year validation. So no longer valid. Be that as it may, I'm probably not likely to get back to sea again. But hey, never say never. So that is it. That is my radio certificates for my time as a radio person. And like I said, I am presently in the process of renewing my ham radio license, and I've ordered a low power transmitter, and I've bought bits and pieces for an antenna, and I'm going to document this whole process so that the 500 people that are subscribed, and probably like 5 of you will be interested in this, who knows. At any rate, I'm having a lot of fun, and hopefully, even if it makes one person interested in amateur radio, and it gets one person pursuing that as a hobby, who knows where it can lead you, because I know I had a lot of family friends who were saying to my parents, he's a bit obsessed with radio, isn't it taking away from his schooling? Aren't you worried that he's not going to do well at school, etc., etc.? And same people were complaining about how ridiculous it was that I was making film star wages at the age of early 20s. Because yeah, being paid at sea in the offshore industry was like 5 times what I was, or 4 or 5 times what I was earning onshore as a young person. So yeah, you never know where an interest will take somebody, especially a passionate interest. Anyway, that's my ham radio story and my radio story in general. And if you're into ham radio and you really like this video, please hit the subscribe, hit the like button, and I'll make lots more videos because that's what I like to do. See you in the next one.